All right, back at the High Court again today, or the Federal Court. You got there's Josh Lees, the Shorts there, and Sue Higginson, the Greens representative, and a media group, and then one supporter, pretty much. So they're going to have a press conference now.
All right. Okay. So the Supreme Court of New South Wales has just found that the anti-protest laws that Chris Minns rammed through Parliament in February, specifically relating to places of worship, are unconstitutional. They are invalid. They've been ruled out by the court. So everything that we argued in the court has been upheld. We said from the beginning that what Chris Minns was doing was an outrageous overreach in trying to find some new way to ban protests in New South Wales. This, of course, comes on the back of Chris Minns' long-running hostility to the right to protest in this state. He's rafted measures over many years and previous governments to try to deny our rights to protest in New South Wales. In this case, he tried to say that any protest happening near any place of worship could be banned by the police. Basically, even if those protests had nothing to do with that place of worship, even if that place of worship was empty, and as we argued, this potentially could extend to denying our right to protest in entire swathes of the CBD, at Hyde Park, at Town Hall, and not just here in Sydney, of course, but in regional towns and cities all around New South Wales. This right to protest was being threatened by Chris Minns. Now, Minns passed these laws on the basis of a pack of lies. This is very important as well. He passed these laws exploiting and exacerbating the fear created around the Dural Caravan hoax, what we now know is a big criminal con job. We know that Chris Minns' government knew the reality of that criminal con job and yet did his best to keep the public and the Parliament in the dark while he ran these laws through the Parliament. Since then, he has still tried to justify these laws by cooking the books, putting out fake statistics about a supposed anti-Semitism crisis, which we now know, again, the government has cynically, massively exaggerated in order to try to justify these laws. And he's been found out to be lying again and again and again. And now he has massive egg on his face. These laws have been ruled out. Thankfully, at least in this matter, we've been able to uphold the right of the people of New South Wales to protest. And that is so important because there is so much to protest about, as we keep saying. And I'll say this as well, like, obviously we see this ceasefire deal in Gaza, but already we see Israel continuing to kill the Palestinian people in Gaza, continuing to carry out massacres, continuing to deny the access of aid to the people of Gaza, which means there is no ability for people to reconstruct their homes, let alone still to find food in Gaza today. That is still happening. There has been no influx of aid into the Gaza Strip. And we see Israel, Netanyahu and Trump already now threatening to unleash mass brutality and violence and massacres in Gaza again on the flimsiest of pretexts. So we are very concerned that any moment could see a renewal of the slaughter in Gaza by Israel. We've also seen the barbarity of Israel's occupation and the last 2 years of genocide, particularly in the release of the bodies of Palestinians, which Israel has now released back to, well, some of them have been released back to Palestinian families, and we can see, I think it's 90, which means there are probably hundreds more bodies which show that Israel has been, on a mass scale, executing and torturing to death prisoners and captives and hostages that they have kidnapped from the Gaza Strip over the last 2 years. This is absolutely shocking and horrifying, and this is the regime that our government continues to export weapons to, continues to export parts of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter jet and other weapons components still being sent to this regime in Israel. And on top of all of that, even if this so-called peace plan does hold, this is not peace for the Palestinian people. This spells out a new form of brutal, ongoing occupation at the behest of people like Donald Trump and Tony Blair and Netanyahu, who have carried out 2 years of genocide in Gaza, where there is to be no self-determination for the Palestinian people, probably no reconstruction of Gaza for the Palestinian people, just years of grinding subjugation and misery. So we absolutely will continue to protest as a Palestine movement here and all around the world. This movement has gained in momentum massively in recent times with huge mobilizations and now general strikes happening in places like Italy. And we're going to keep fighting until we have genuine peace for the Palestinian people. That means peace with justice. That means peace with liberation and freedom. That's what we've always fought for, and we're going to continue to fight for that. And the judgment today means that there's one less obstacle in fighting for that. And we say once again that Chris Minns has shamefully lined up with a genocidal regime for 2 years now. He's done more to stop us protesting against the genocide than he has done himself to do anything to try to stop this genocide. In fact, he's supported it. So today is a win for the Palestine movement, and not just for the Palestine movement, but for everyone who ever might want to protest for anything in this state, whether that's union rights, for workers' rights, for LGBT rights, for the environment. As we said, all of these rights and of course are under attack by Minns laws. So that's from me, by the way, if I could say. I'm Josh Lees from the Palestine Action Group in Sydney, and I'll hand over to Sue Higginson, who's from the Greens New South Wales here as well.
Today's judgment is a resounding win for all of New South Wales, for our democracy and our right to protest in New South Wales on public lands across New South Wales. We warned Premier Chris Minns. We warned him loud and clear, in no uncertain terms, he had crossed a bridge too far. He made a captain's call, he was emboldened, and he decided to go too far to provide the police unreasonable powers to be able to control the people on the streets of New South Wales. He created a moral panic, and when governments create moral panics, they make grave mistakes and they do go too far. We have seen this in history, and we have seen it again today. The Supreme Court of New South Wales has found that Chris Minns's police powers do impermissibly burden the constitutional freedom of political communication that every person in New South Wales, in Australia, holds, and we hold that freedom strong, loud and proud. And we now know no executive, no premier is able to embolden police to burden that freedom. This is so important. We are not, and we will not become, a police state. It is just not befitting of a mature and a sophisticated democracy. And thank goodness we have a court of justice that has ruled, and thank goodness we have people and organisations as courageous as Josh and the Palestine Action Group who will take on this courageous challenge and stand up for our democracy and our freedoms. These are freedoms from police arbitrary intervention upon people who are exercising their rights of protest, of political conscience. We stand together and we have a right to speak and show our dissent to governments and premiers when we don't agree with the direction they are taking our democracy. And trying to silence the pro-Palestinian movement in New South Wales has been nothing but shocking on part of the Minns Labor government. Today, I hope Chris Minns has drawn a line in the sand and knows no more war against the people, no more seeking to use the New South Wales Police Force to implement that war against the people. Let the people protest and let our democracy thrive with all of the voices of peace and justice and protection that we see on our streets.
Josh, can I ask you, in December of last year, we saw pro-Palestine protesters gather out in front of the Great Synagogue, or the synagogue was locked down and inside. With this decision today, do you see a return to that, or instances where synagogues and things like that may be targeted?
I mean, you're repeating some of the mistruths and mischaracterizations that the other side tried to put in this case, which have been struck down. There were no protests targeting the synagogue as a religious venue or anything like that. There's only been one protest that I know of that's ever taken place somewhere near a synagogue, and that's because it was not a religious event taking place. It was an event with a former IDF soldier in support of Israel's campaign of genocide in Gaza taking place. So that's why there was a small protest that gathered, which did not block any of the entrances or do anything like that. To say that what we've been doing is protesting against synagogues and that's going to continue is total mistruth. That's never happened and not what we've been doing. What Minns did was try to use this whole affair as a pretext to ban protests about any cause, as I said, even if they had nothing to do with places of worship.
John, that's never your intention to launch this legal action so you could protest outside a place of worship.
No, exactly. I mean, we have not. The Palestine Action Group has not organised a single protest targeting a place of worship this entire time for the last 2 years and for years before that. But the point is, these laws were about targeting anyone who protested near a place of worship, even if it had nothing to do with that place of worship or those worshippers, as I said. So this was an excuse for Minsk, another way for Minsk to try to ban protests, which he's made no secret of the fact that he wants to do. And they've been struck down.
Are you concerned that we will go back to the drawing board, be more specific, targeting certain protest groups around religious sites? Are there concerns that could happen?
I mean, if you were to do that, that would be outrageous. There would be no justification for that. I think this ruling will make it hard for him to do that. And if we have to, we'll fight that again.
And what does it mean for this weekend? You've got more action planned for this weekend. What do you take away from this and into the weekend?
I mean, it won't directly affect there's a protest this weekend, a kind of anti-racist, anti-fascist protest happening this weekend. We're planning our next Palestine protest on Sunday, the 26th of October, for all the reasons I said, because Israel is still killing and starving the people of Gaza and occupying 60% of Gaza and threatening even more violence yet again. So, and this movement, far from going away, I think is going to keep building around the world as we demand justice and freedom for the people of Palestine. One of the other things that Chris Minns is doing in this state, for example, in less than 3 weeks' time, is hosting another odious weapons summit, actually, the so-called Indo-Pacific 2025, basically an arms fair in the Darling Harbour right here, which is going to see in attendance weapons companies from around the world, including many of the major weapons companies who have produced and supplied and profited from the genocide in Gaza. We're talking about companies like Lockheed Martin, Elbit Systems, BAE Systems, and so on. And this event is officially sponsored, co-hosted, presumably partly funded by New South Wales taxpayers and the government. This event we are going to be protesting against, blockading. It deserves to be shut down. The executives of these companies should be arrested for war crimes.
Can either of you give us an idea of how much you think this case will end up costing the government?
The taxpayer. Yeah. I was going to say the cost of the taxpayer. I mean, these cases are. Look, this was I think that the applicants made a very discreet, direct, efficient proceedings. They brought very clear, concise arguments. It would have been good if the government had chosen not to defend these proceedings, and it would have been even better if Chris Minns had heeded the calls of the wise people that argued against these laws in the Parliament, including members of his own caucus who were well qualified to make the call that these laws were unconstitutional. But at the end of the day, we are talking tens of thousands of dollars, if not into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, when all things are considered.
Yeah, Chris Minns never should have passed these laws. The Parliament never should have voted for them, and they should have been repealed, especially when it was revealed that the laws were based on a pack of lies, as I said. That should have happened months ago, which we called for at the time.
Josh, have you given up on?
Sorry, I'll take it.
Have either of you had any reports from protesters being moved on yet?
I'm not aware of these powers being used yet.
But we did see, if you recall, we did see that dreadful event with the police response at Belmore outside of the plating company's protest that morning in Belmore. What we did see is the creep of these words into the police fact sheets. And let's never forget, that was the morning that Hannah Thomas was violently assaulted by police and may have sustained injuries that will render her vision impaired in one eye for the rest of her life. I read those police fact sheets. They referred to a place of worship within the vicinity. That was evidence in my mind and everybody else's mind that these laws were as we warned. They would embolden police, they were draconian, and that they were a frightening creep towards police violence and police overreach. We saw it play out. So whilst they were not relied on in charges, they were certainly written in police facts, and that speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll just add to that quickly. I think we probably would have seen the police use these laws more, except that we had challenged them in this place. The fact that we launched this challenge meant that the police, I think, were reticent to be shown to be using the laws to attack protests, which is exactly what we said they were intended to do at the beginning.
Just before, you said that Chris Minns cooked the books in terms of those crime statistics that we saw recently. Are you suggesting that he was aware the police were propagating false statistics?
Well, I don't know if he was aware exactly of that, but he clearly was not being very careful with the truth. He has repeatedly have to revise what he was saying, because initially he came out to try to say there's been, 800 and something cases of anti-Semitic attacks in this state to try to justify these anti-protest laws, which, by the way, as if protests have anything to do with that anyway. Obviously, the anti-Semitism does exist, and it is a problem when we're against it. But the idea that protests are the cause of that is ludicrous. But anyway, he said there was 800 and something cases, then they had to revise that down to 700, then it turned out that was a doubling of the real number of cases, and then it turned out that even the number of cases that they had been fibbing to the media about was full of lies and distortions, as we know now. And it's shocking if you read through what the police and the government have done. They've taken dozens and dozens and dozens of cases of Palestine supporters being attacked and categorised them as cases of anti-Semitism, which has then been used to attack Palestine supporters. This is what's happened, along with at least 38 just duplication of cases in the figures, a host of other things, which is just someone saying Free Palestine, which has then been categorised as anti-Semitism. So this is exactly what we've said all along, is that this moral panic, which has been whipped up around a supposed anti-Semitism crisis, has been cynically whipped up and manipulated from day one as an effort to attack the anti-genocide, pro-Palestine movement. That's all this has been about.
And we have not yet seen the Premier stand in front of the media and correct the record. He just has not done that yet. It's not too late, and in fact, we call on the Premier to stand up and actually now correct the record of the wrongs that he has placed on the public record. It's important when we are talking about potential crimes and allegations of crimes, and we are introducing laws, that we do so on a correct basis. And right now, the public record stands uncorrected by the Premier, who has spoken wrongly about that record.
And just last week as well, we saw the Court of Appeal sort of stretch the limits of what the penalties can be for unauthorised protesters' verdict on the Opera House protest. After today's success, do you see, I guess, more mobility towards challenging some of the parts of that outcome, or does it kind of reshape your thinking about that past verdict?
Yeah, I think that verdict will be challenged. I think it needs to be challenged. I think the court got that one wrong, in my opinion. We're still seeking advice about the best way to go about doing that, whether that's now or into the future.
And when you say you're seeking advice about how you and your group would challenge?
Well, whether it's us or someone else, I think that verdict needs to be challenged, because it's set back the right to protest potentially even further in New South Wales.
Great, thank you everyone.
Thanks, guys.
I'm going to go post it.
All right, well, that's it. The media, pretty much the only ones here. The Sky News guy's doing his cast now. You've got a few floaters, a few people floating around the rim who aren't particularly part of it. That's it. They had a very small contingent of supporters. There's a lady up the top there. There's this lady here, and then maybe there are other lady. The Students for Palestine lady, Sky News, not supporter, of course. That's it. It's done. It's all over. Oh, sure. That guy. Is he 9? So it's kind of 9. The Murdoch and the 2GB guy, the little fellow there with the backpack, getting his microphone back. So it's very much the Murdoch-y type media that has the interest in it. So yeah, let's leave it at that. And so I guess it's a success story for protests. I just, you know me, I'm interested in the protests, and happy to be here covering it. And yibba-dibba. That's all, folks.